A woman worth $12 billion disguised in clothes from an op shop sits alone in the most expensive restaurant she owns. She's not here for the food. She's hunting for something money can't buy, honesty. But in a world of fake smiles and calculated kindness, her search feels hopeless. She orders the $650 Wagyu Emperor's Cut, a silent test for the staff. The young waiter who serves her seems different. There's a quiet desperation in his eyes that cuts through her cynicism. As he clears her plate, his hand trembles as he slips a folded napkin towards her. She expects a phone number, a plea for cash. But when she opens it, 4 chilling words stop her heart and threaten to bring her entire empire crashing down. The weight of Victoria Sterling's fortune was a physical thing, a designer armor woven from mining rights and tech patents. It was impossibly heavy. At 38, she commanded Sterling Enterprises, a sprawling global empire with interests in everything from luxury hospitality to renewable energy. From her penthouse office overlooking Sydney Harbour, she could reshape industries and influence government policy with a single decision. She was a queen in a kingdom of glass and steel, and she was profoundly, achingly alone. The world she inhabited was curated. Every interaction was filtered through assistants, lawyers, and media handlers. The people she met had been vetted, their smiles polished, their intentions sanitized. They laughed at her observations, even the mundane ones. They agreed with her opinions, even the half-formed ones. She was surrounded by mirrors, each one reflecting a carefully constructed image of the woman they thought she wanted to be. The real Victoria, the one who had grown up in regional Queensland dreaming of becoming a marine biologist, had been lost somewhere during the ascent to power. Before we dive deeper into Victoria's story, I have to ask, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let me know your city or country. I'm genuinely curious about our global audience. This evening's exercise in self-examination was born from that isolation. It was a ritual she performed every few months, a pilgrimage back to reality. She would shed the skin of Victoria Sterling, the corporate titan, and adopt the humble persona of Vicky, a woman adrift in the world. The clothes were carefully chosen from a Salvo's store in Melbourne's western suburbs. A faded denim jacket with frayed cuffs, a simple cotton dress that had seen better years, and sneakers that were soft with age. A pair of non-prescription glasses with thick, unglamorous frames and deliberately mussed hair completed the transformation. Looking in the cracked mirror of a service station bathroom, she saw not a billionaire, but a woman who might be struggling to pay her electricity bill. Her destination was the Harbour Crown, the flagship restaurant of her hospitality division. It was the jewel in her culinary empire, a place renowned for its premium Australian beef, wine cellar worth millions, and a client list that included politicians and celebrities. She had acquired the restaurant chain 3 years ago, and while the profit margins were exceptional, she had never set foot in this particular location as herself. Her reports, compiled by her CEO Marcus Thornfield, spoke of flawless service, impeccable quality, and record-breaking revenues. But reports were just numbers on spreadsheets. They couldn't measure the soul of a place. Victoria wanted to see it for herself through the eyes of someone who didn't matter. She pushed through the heavy glass doors, and Brisbane's humid evening air was instantly replaced by the cool sophistication of fine dining. The interior was all warm timber and soft lighting, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering stunning views of the Brisbane River. The scent of grilled meat, aged wine, and expensive cologne filled the air. A hostess with platinum blonde hair and a smile as bright as it was artificial gave her casual attire a swift, dismissive glance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting Victoria had wandered in by mistake. "A table for one, please," Victoria said, deliberately softening her usually commanding voice. The hostess hesitated, her eyes scanning the elegant dining room. Most tables were occupied by couples in designer clothing and groups of business executives. "Do you have a reservation?" "No." "Is that a problem?" Her smile tightened. "We're typically fully booked. Let me see what I can manage." She tapped at her tablet with perfectly manicured nails, the exaggerated motion conveying what an enormous inconvenience this was. After a theatrical pause, she looked up. "I can seat you at a small table near the service station. It's all we have available tonight." It was a classic dismissal, a table reserved for walk-ins deemed unworthy of the prime real estate. "That's fine," Victoria said, playing her part. She was led past tables where diners paused their conversations to watch her passage, their curiosity mixed with subtle disdain. She was an anomaly in this carefully curated environment, a dandelion in a rose garden. She felt their judgment like a physical weight, and familiar resentment coiled in her stomach. This was the world she had built, a world that measured human worth by the price of their accessories. She was seated at a cramped table tucked beside the bustling service corridor, exactly as promised. The constant stream of staff created a jarring soundtrack of clinking plates and hurried footsteps. It was the worst seat in the house. It was perfect. From her position, she could observe the restaurant's social dynamics. She watched the waiters move with practiced precision, their attention calibrated to the perceived wealth of their tables. She saw the restaurant manager, a sharp-dressed woman with auburn hair pulled into a severe bun, working the room with calculated charm. Victoria recognized her from corporate files. Stephanie Marsh. Marsh laughed loudly at a patron's joke, her hand briefly touching his shoulder. But the moment she turned away, the smile vanished, replaced by cold calculation. She snapped a quiet but harsh order at a passing busboy who flinched and hurried away. Victoria settled in, becoming invisible. From this position of invisibility, she could finally see. She saw the careful choreography of class and expectation. She saw the performative deference, the transactional kindness. It was exactly what she had anticipated. It was a well-oiled machine, efficient, profitable, and utterly hollow. "I'm curious, have you ever felt invisible in a place where you should have been welcomed? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes the most revealing moments come when we're overlooked." She had been nursing a glass of tap water for about 15 minutes when a waiter approached her table. He was different from the others. While the rest of the staff had a polished, professional veneer, he seemed more genuine, almost vulnerable. He was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, with kind hazel eyes and sandy brown hair that was slightly disheveled despite his obvious attempts to tame it. His uniform was clean but showed signs of wear, the black shirt slightly faded at the shoulders, the apron bearing permanent stains despite repeated washing. What she noticed most was a slight tremor in his hands as he placed a bread basket on her table, and the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of exhaustion that went deeper than a long shift. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "My name is Liam, and I'll be looking after you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink?" She looked at his name tag. Liam. It suited him, a gentle, unpretentious name. She deliberately ordered the cheapest wine on the menu, watching for any flicker of disappointment, any subtle change in his demeanor that would reveal his judgment. She saw none. "Excellent choice," he said with the same steady, pleasant tone. "I'll be right back with that." As he walked away, she noticed his shoes, standard black service shoes, but the leather was cracked, the soles worn thin. They were the shoes of someone who spent countless hours on their feet, someone for whom replacing them was a financial consideration rather than a simple necessity. It was a small detail, but it painted a clearer picture than any of Marcus Thornfield's quarterly reports. For the first time all evening, Victoria Sterling felt a genuine spark of curiosity. Who was this young man, Liam, who looked at a woman in op-shop clothes and saw not a lesser person, but simply a person? She didn't know it yet, but her simple test for authenticity was about to unravel a web of corruption that reached into the very core of her company. And this quiet waiter with the tired eyes and worn shoes was the only one with the courage to light the match. Liam Mitchell, Liam to everyone who knew him, moved through the controlled chaos of the harbor, the Crown like a man walking through a minefield. He was efficient, he was polite, but he kept part of himself carefully protected. The restaurant was a stage, and every night he performed the role of the attentive, cheerful waiter. Behind that performance, a storm of anxiety raged. His younger sister Emma was the center of his universe. At 19, she should have been worried about university assignments and social media followers. Instead, her life revolved around specialist appointments, medication schedules, and the constant fear that her next seizure might be the one that changed everything forever. She had a rare form of epilepsy that conventional treatments couldn't control. The only hope was an experimental therapy available at a private clinic in Melbourne, treatment that cost more than most people earned in several years. Every dollar Liam earned, every tip he collected, went toward Emma's medical fund. The job at the Harbour Crown paid better than other restaurants, but it came with a price. The manager, Stephanie Marsh, was a predator disguised as a professional. She had discovered an inventory discrepancy several months ago, a simple error Liam had made while exhausted after a double shift. The mistake was minor and easily correctable, but in Marsh's hands, it became a weapon. She had cornered him in her office, her voice honey-sweet with menace. She accused him of theft, threatened to have him arrested and banned from working in hospitality anywhere in Queensland. Then she offered him a lifeline. He could work off the debt, which she had inflated to an impossible $8,000. His wages would be garnished, his tips monitored. He was in effect her bonded laborer. But the real horror began when Marsh discovered his basic bookkeeping skills from his abandoned accounting studies. She began forcing him to help her manipulate invoices and reconcile falsified records. Late at night, after the restaurant closed, she would call him into her office to work on what she called special accounts. He saw numbers that didn't add up, invoices from suppliers he'd never heard of, massive payments flowing into accounts he couldn't trace. He was trapped, a reluctant accomplice to crimes he was only beginning to understand. Here's a question for all of you watching. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your principles and protecting someone you love? It's one of life's most difficult crossroads. Let me know in the comments how you'd handle Liam's dilemma. Every shift was a tightrope walk over an abyss of terror. When he first saw the woman in the denim jacket seated at table 18, his immediate response was sympathy. It was one of the worst tables, a location where Marsh seated people she deemed unworthy of the main dining room. He had seen the hostess lead her there with barely concealed contempt. The other waiters would likely ignore her, focusing their energy on tables with higher tipping potential. Liam wasn't built that way. His mother had raised him to believe that every person deserved dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances. He approached her with the same genuine courtesy he offered every guest. When she ordered the house wine, the cheapest option, he simply nodded and smiled. Her worth wasn't determined by her wine selection. As he went about his duties, he kept glancing at her table. She wasn't checking her phone or trying to attract attention. She was simply watching, her gaze moving around the room with quiet, unsettling intelligence. There was a stillness about her, a composure that seemed oddly sophisticated for someone in such humble clothing. She looked less like a struggling customer and more like an undercover investigator, patiently documenting everything she observed. When she ordered the Wagyu Emperor's Cut, the restaurant's most expensive dish at $650, Liam's professional composure nearly shattered. The premium beef was a showpiece, typically ordered by wealthy businessmen for Instagram posts or expense account dinners. It was not something a woman in a $15 jacket ordered casually. He glanced at her worn sneakers, then back at her calm, unreadable expression. His mind raced through possibilities. Was this some kind of test? Was she a food blogger creating content? Or was she simply someone with expensive tastes and hidden resources? Marsh would be furious if this order couldn't be paid for, and that fury would inevitably land on him. He had a choice. He could question her, potentially embarrassing her, and direct her toward something more affordable. That's what Marsh would demand. Or he could trust her, treat her with the same respect he gave every other customer, and hope his instincts were correct. Looking into her eyes again, He saw no uncertainty, no hesitation. There was just quiet confidence and what felt like a challenge. In that moment, Liam made his decision. He would give her the dignity of assuming she knew what she was doing. "Perfect choice," he said, his voice steady despite his internal turmoil. "How would you like that prepared?" "Medium rare," she replied, her gaze never wavering. "And a glass of the 2019 Penfolds Grange to accompany it." Now Liam was truly staggered. The Penfolds Grange was legendary, one of Australia's most prestigious wines. Even a single glass cost $450. Combined with the steak, this unknown woman at the restaurant's worst table was ordering nearly $1,100 worth of food and wine. Every alarm in his head was screaming, but something deeper, an intuition he couldn't explain, told him to trust her. "Excellent pairing," he said, maintaining his composure. "I'll have that right out for you." As he walked toward the kitchen, he could feel Marcia's predatory gaze following him. The system would automatically flag such a high-value order, and she would be on her way over within minutes. He braced himself for the confrontation, knowing that if this went wrong, his sister Emma might pay the ultimate price. Sure enough, Marsh intercepted him near the wine station, her face flushed with anger. "Mitchell," she hissed, blocking his path. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Table 18 just ordered over $1,000 worth of food and wine. Did you see what she's wearing? She looks like she sleeps under a bridge." "She seemed confident about her order, Ms. Marsh," Liam replied, keeping his voice respectful but firm. "I didn't want to offend a guest by questioning her choices." "Offend a guest?" Marsh's voice dripped with venom. "You're about to bankrupt yourself. When she does a runner, that entire bill is coming out of your debt payment. Every last cent. That'll add another 3 years to your contract with me." The threat hit him like a physical blow. 3 more years of indentured servitude. 3 more years of Emma's condition potentially worsening while he remained trapped. But as he looked past Marsh toward table 18, he saw the woman watching them. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could clearly see the power dynamic. She saw Marsh's aggression and his fear, and she simply nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture of acknowledgement. It was a small thing, but it sent a surge of courage through him. She saw him. She understood. In that moment, he felt less alone than he had in months. "I understand the risk, Ms. Marsh," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll take full responsibility." Marsh glared at him for a long moment, then stalked away, muttering threats under her breath. Liam took a shaky breath and proceeded to the wine cellar to retrieve the precious Penfolds Grange. As he carefully poured the legendary wine, a desperate plan began forming in his mind. This woman was different. She had power. He could sense it. Maybe, just maybe, she was the lifeline he and Emma desperately needed. It was a wild, terrifying gamble. But as he watched Marsh across the room, schmoozing with wealthy patrons while slowly destroying her employees' lives, he knew he had to try. He had to take the risk and pass her a message. The rhythm of the dinner service continued, a relentless symphony of orders, plates, and forced pleasantries. Liam moved through it mechanically, his body performing familiar tasks while his mind raced, planning. The woman at table 18, his mysterious, paradoxical guest, was savoring her meal slowly, deliberately. Time was running out. Every time he passed her table, he felt her watchful gaze. It wasn't uncomfortable or predatory. It was patient, waiting. It was the gaze of someone accustomed to observing, to understanding situations before acting. Her quiet confidence both terrified and inspired him. The note was his only option. He couldn't speak to her directly, not with Marcia's reptilian surveillance of every interaction. A whispered conversation could be overheard. A direct approach would be professional suicide. The message had to be silent, subtle, and compelling enough to capture the attention of someone who clearly wielded influence. What could he write? "Help me," sounded pathetic, desperate. "My manager is corrupt," seemed like a disgruntled employee's complaint. No, It had to be something bigger, something that would pique the curiosity of a person with real power. Something that hinted at a problem that extended beyond his personal situation. He thought about the falsified records Marsh forced him to reconcile, the invoices from Pacific Premium Provisions, a company that seemed to exist only on paper, the massive overcharges, the way Marsh always checked over her shoulder when handling those specific documents. He didn't understand the full scope of what was happening, but he knew it was criminal. That secret would be his weapon. During a brief lull, he slipped into the staff break room, a cramped space that smelled of instant coffee and industrial disinfectant. His heart hammered against his ribs as he grabbed a clean linen napkin from the service stack. His hand trembled so violently he could barely grip the pen he'd retrieved from his apron. He took a deep breath, trying to channel the quiet strength he'd seen in the stranger's eyes. He needed to be precise, intriguing, and urgent. He had to give her a reason to believe him, a thread she could pull to unravel the whole sordid tapestry. He wrote quickly, his handwriting tight and hurried. "They know who you are. The books are cooked. Check Marsh's office safe, Pacific Premium Provisions. She's poisoning the reputation you built." It was a gamble built on pure instinct. The phrase, "they know who you are," suggested this woman was someone important, someone worth watching. Poisoning the reputation you built implied she had a personal stake in the restaurant's integrity. It wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action from someone who understood that reputations were valuable assets. He didn't sign it. The note had to remain anonymous, a ghost's whisper. He folded the napkin into a tight square and tucked it deep into his apron pocket, where it felt like carrying a live explosive. His shift was nearly over. The woman had already paid her bill, in cash, the exact amount of $1,098.50 including service charge. It was another intriguing detail. No credit card meant no electronic trail, but the precise amount suggested someone who understood exactly what she was paying for. As he approached her table for the final service, his pulse thundered in his ears. Marsh was stationed near the host stand, but her attention was momentarily diverted by a phone call. "Will there be anything else this evening, ma'am?" he asked, his voice miraculously steady. "No, thank you, Liam. The meal was exceptional," she replied. But her eyes conveyed a different message entirely. They were focused, expectant. "I'm delighted to hear that," he said, beginning to clear the wine glass and coffee cup. His movements were practiced, efficient, but his left hand, hidden from the dining room by his own body, slid the folded napkin from his pocket and placed it on the table, immediately covering it with the leather bill folder he was also collecting. The entire exchange took less than 2 seconds, a sleight of hand born of desperation and months of careful observation of how to move invisibly in this space. But as he lifted the folder, the woman spoke again, her voice carrying just far enough to be heard. "Wait." Liam froze, his back to her, the note now concealed beneath the leather folder. Ice water seemed to flow through his veins. Had she seen? Was she going to expose him right here in the dining room? Was this all an elaborate trap? Slowly, he turned to face her. She was no longer looking at him, but at the empty space on the table where the bill folder had been. She had observed his sleight of hand, had seen him place something and then immediately retrieve it. His attempt at subtlety had been too clever. She thought he had changed his mind and taken the note back. Her eyes lifted to meet his, and there was no anger in them, only confusion and what might have been disappointment. She had been expecting something, had been waiting for him to take a risk, and believed he had lost his nerve at the crucial moment. Liam's mind reeled. He had failed. In his attempt to be discreet, he had outsmarted himself. She thought he had abandoned his attempt to communicate. Standing there, trapped in her gaze with the damning napkin burning beneath the leather folder, he realized he had to correct this misunderstanding. Let me pause here and ask, have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between safety and doing what's right? What would you do in Liam's position? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing different perspectives on these moral dilemmas. With courage he didn't know he possessed, he stepped back to the table. His movements were stiff, unnatural. He could feel Marsh finishing her phone call, her attention beginning to shift back to the dining room. Time was running out. Without a word, he lifted the leather folder just enough for the white square of napkin to slide onto the polished wood table. He didn't look at the woman. He couldn't. He simply placed the folder beside the note and walked away, his entire body trembling with the enormity of what he'd just done. He felt like he had just stepped off a cliff, trusting that someone would catch him. Victoria Sterling watched the young waiter's retreat, her mind spinning with confusion and sudden, crystalline clarity. She had observed the entire fumbled exchange, the initial placement, his panicked retrieval, and the final desperate correction. His whispered words, "You forgot this," were obviously a fabrication. She had left nothing behind except the precise payment. The note was what he wanted her to have. The information was the currency. She waited until he had disappeared through the service doors before casually placing her hand over the napkin. The texture confirmed it, cloth, not paper money. She stood, putting on her faded denim jacket, and gave the manager, Marsh, a brief nod, the kind of gesture an ordinary customer gives to acknowledge the establishment before leaving. Once outside in Brisbane's humid evening air, she walked several blocks before stopping under a street light near the Brisbane River. The city's sounds, traffic, distant music, the gentle lapping of water, felt muted, distant. Her heart was beating faster than it had in years. She wasn't Victoria Sterling, billionaire. She was just a woman on a dark street, holding someone's secret. She unfolded the napkin carefully. The hastily scrawled words seemed to glow under the LED streetlight. "They know who you are. The books are cooked. Check Marsh's office safe, Pacific Premium Provisions. She's poisoning the reputation you built." Victoria read it once, then again, then a third time. This wasn't a plea for money or a romantic advance. This was a declaration of war. Poisoning the reputation you built, cut straight to her core, an attack on the Sterling brand, on the very promise of quality and excellence she sold to the world. If it was true, it was a cancer growing in her empire. If it was a lie, it was a dangerous game being played by someone who somehow knew exactly who she was. Her simple test for authenticity had unearthed something far darker. The quiet waiter with the worn shoes and exhausted eyes hadn't just served her a meal. He had served her a conspiracy on a linen napkin. A mystery that stopped her cold and would irreversibly change not just her evening, but potentially her entire company. She looked back toward the warm golden light spilling from the Harbour Crown's windows. It no longer looked like a restaurant. It looked like a crime scene. The Brisbane River reflected the city lights as Victoria Sterling stood beneath the streetlight, the cryptic message burning in her palm. Her undercover mission, once a melancholic exercise in self-discovery, had instantly transformed into a high-stakes corporate thriller. The shift was jarring, but it awakened a part of her that had been dormant for too long, the ruthless, decisive strategist who had built her empire from a small mining operation in Western Australia. She walked along the riverbank for several blocks, letting the anonymity of the evening joggers and late diners swallow her. She needed to think, to separate paranoia from possibility. They know who you are. Pourtve? Was this a warning for Vicky, the ordinary customer who had drawn attention, or for Victoria Sterling, the owner they couldn't possibly have recognized? She's poisoning the reputation you built. That phrase resonated with cold, hard dread. It suggested systematic deception that went far beyond simple embezzlement. It implied an assault on the integrity of everything she had worked to create. She found a quiet wine bar overlooking the Story Bridge, a stark contrast to the opulence of the Harbour Crown, and took a corner table. The worn leather booth and dim lighting provided the anonymity she needed. She pulled out her encrypted phone, a device reserved for her most sensitive communications. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Sterling Enterprises, Marcus Thornfield speaking. "Marcus, it's Victoria." There was a brief pause. Marcus Thornfield was more than her so. He was her anchor, a man of exceptional intelligence and unwavering loyalty. He had been with her since the company's early days and was one of only 2 people who knew about her periodic undercover expeditions. "Victoria, you sound different. Is everything all right with tonight's reconnaissance?" The reconnaissance uncovered something. A problem at the Harbour Crown in Brisbane. A significant problem. She quickly recounted the evening's events, her dismissive treatment, the arrogant manager, the young waiter's desperate courage, and the cryptic warning. Finally, she read the note's contents aloud. Silence hummed across the connection. Marcus was processing, weighing possibilities against probabilities. "Poisoning the reputation you built?" he repeated slowly. "That's very specific language. It suggests someone who understands brand value, not just a disgruntled employee with a grievance." This waiter, he was terrified, Marcus. The kind of fear that goes beyond workplace politics. Marsh was threatening him about the bill, treating him like property. But he still took this enormous risk to get that note to me. "Fear can motivate both truth and deception," Marcus cautioned. "This Liam, did he seem to have a personal agenda?" Victoria thought about the young man's worn shoes, his exhausted eyes, the tremor in his hands. He seemed trapped, like someone drowning who just spotted a lifeline. She paused. "People don't risk everything over petty grievances, Marcus. There's something larger happening here. I can initiate a formal audit first thing tomorrow morning. We can seize all records legally, properly documented." "No," Victoria said firmly. "An official audit gives Marsh time to react, to hide evidence, to cover tracks. I saw the way she was watching when I left. She's already suspicious of tonight's unusual customer. If corporate auditors appear tomorrow, she'll connect the dots immediately. Our only advantage is the element of surprise." "Victoria, you can't seriously be considering—" "I need to get into that office tonight, before she has a chance to destroy whatever evidence exists." Victoria's voice carried the quiet authority that had built her empire. "Before she comes in tomorrow morning and realizes that her worst nightmare just ordered the Wagyu at table 18. A long sigh traveled through the phone. "This is exactly what your board of directors worry about. You have an entire security department, but you insist on handling these situations personally." "My father taught me never to ask someone to do something I wouldn't do myself," Victoria replied. "Besides, who would suspect a woman in op-shop clothes of being a corporate raider?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, weighing massive risks against potential catastrophe. "All right," he said finally, resignation clear in his voice. "But you're not going in alone. I have a contact in Brisbane, a security specialist named Alex Jen. Former Australian Federal Police, specializes in corporate investigations and discrete evidence gathering. The best there is." "Good," Victoria said, momentum building. "Also, I need everything you can find on this waiter, Liam Mitchell. Complete background check. If he's telling the truth, he's in danger. If he's lying, I need to know why. I'll have Alex contact you within the hour. And Victoria, this feels different. Be careful." "I know," Victoria said, staring at the lights dancing on the Brisbane River. "That's what makes it so important." She ended the call and sent her location to Marcus. The waiting was torture. She sat in the wine bar, the note hidden in her jacket pocket, her mind racing through possibilities. She thought about Liam's face, the mixture of terror and determination when he'd finally passed her the message. He had trusted a complete stranger with what might be his only chance for justice. She couldn't let him down. "I have to ask, if someone took a massive risk to help you, how far would you go to protect them in return?" The bond between Victoria and Liam is just beginning to form. If this story is resonating with you, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think Victoria should do next. 43 minutes later, her encrypted phone vibrated with a text. "River walk behind you. Silver Toyota. 2 minutes." Victoria paid for her wine and slipped out the bar's rear exit into a narrow lane lined with dumpsters and service entries. As promised, a silver sedan pulled up silently, its engine barely audible. The rear door opened, and she slid inside. The woman behind the wheel didn't turn around, studying Victoria in the rearview mirror instead. She appeared to be in her early 40s, with sharp features and intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore dark clothing that seemed designed to blend into shadows. "Marcus says you need to become invisible," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent that suggested multicultural Brisbane upbringing. "I'm Alex Chin. I make problems disappear, or in this case, I make people disappear long enough to solve problems. Can you get me into a restaurant manager's office without triggering security?" Victoria asked directly. Sterling Enterprises uses Blackstone security systems in their hospitality division, Alex replied, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I helped design those protocols when I was still with the AFP. I can walk through them like they don't exist." "What about internal security? Cameras, motion sensors?" "The manager's office will have its own systems, probably a simple keypad lock and maybe a basic camera setup. Someone as paranoid as your note suggests won't trust company security alone." Alex put the car in gear and pulled smoothly into traffic. The real challenge isn't the technology. It's the human element. Marsh herself might have additional countermeasures we can't predict. "What's your plan?" "Simple," Alex said, navigating through Brisbane's evening traffic. "We don't break in. We walk in the front door." She reached into a bag on the passenger seat and pulled out 2 uniforms. Precision Cleaning Services. They handle after-hours maintenance for most of the high-end restaurants in the city. "I've already added us to tonight's work roster for the Harbour Crown." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. By the time they reached a staging area in a nearby parking structure, Marcus had already worked his digital magic. He had infiltrated the cleaning company's scheduling system, creating employee profiles for both women complete with background checks that would pass casual scrutiny. As Victoria changed into the gray cleaning uniform, she felt the last vestiges of her billionaire identity fade away. She was now Michelle, a night shift cleaner earning minimum wage to pay for her daughter's university fees. "Remember," Alex said, adjusting her own uniform, "we move with purpose. We don't dawdle, we don't make unnecessary eye contact, and we are completely forgettable. Once we're inside, I'll handle Marsh's office security. Your job is to be my lookout and to identify anything that seems important." Alex handed her a nearly invisible earpiece. "If you see anything, staff, security, unexpected activity, you tap your communicator once. Don't speak unless it's an emergency." As they drove toward the darkened restaurant, Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. She opened it to find a preliminary background report on Leah Mitchell. Leah Mitchell, 24. No criminal record. Dropped out of Griffith University accounting program 2 years ago due to family medical emergency. Legal guardian of younger sister Emma Mitchell, 19. Emma suffers from Dravet syndrome, severe form of epilepsy. Medical expenses exceed $200,000 annually. Insurance coverage exhausted. Multiple personal loans in his name. Lives in subsidized housing in Logan. Mother deceased 4 years ago. Father unknown. Victoria's blood ran cold. This wasn't a disgruntled employee playing games. This was a young man drowning, making desperate choices to keep his sister alive. His decision to write that note wasn't just brave, it was an act of profound, selfless love. And Marsh, threatening his employment, was essentially holding a gun to his sister's head. The stakes had just become infinitely more personal. This was no longer just about corporate integrity. It was about justice for Liam and potentially saving Emma's life. Alex pulled their van, emblazoned with the Precision Cleaning logo, up to the service entrance of the Harbour Crown. "Showtime," she said, her expression all business. "Try not to get us arrested, billionaire." The The service entrance of the Harbour Crown was a world away from its elegant dining room. Concrete floors, industrial lighting, and the lingering smell of cooking oil and industrial detergent. Disguised as cleaning staff, Victoria and Alex blended seamlessly with the night shift crew. While Victoria pushed a trolley loaded with supplies to maintain their cover, Alex worked with the calm precision of a master craftsman. The restaurant's main security system was child's play for someone with Alex's background. She looped the cameras, disabled motion sensors, and bypassed the keypad lock on Marsh's office in under 3 minutes. The door swung open silently. Marsh's office was a monument to middle management ambition, motivational posters, fake awards, and photographs of her glad-handing with local politicians and minor celebrities. But Alex ignored the facade, her trained eyes scanning for what mattered. "No physical ledger visible," she whispered into her communicator. "But there's a wall safe behind those management certificates." Victoria's pulse quickened. "Can you crack it?" "Not quietly, not quickly." Alex examined the digital safe. "But someone this arrogant probably uses something personal. What do you see on the walls?" Victoria's gaze swept the office. Photographs of her at various events. A certificate from Hospitality Management School dated 2018. A photo of her with what looks like a youth football team. The football photo. Any jersey numbers visible? Victoria squinted at the framed picture. Marsh was beaming next to a group of young players, wearing a coach's polo. She's holding a trophy. It says, Brisbane Junior League Champions 2022. She's wearing number 7. Alex's fingers moved over the keypad. A series of beeps, then silence, followed by a soft mechanical click. "We're in." Inside the safe were neat stacks of cash, a backup hard drive, and a black leather ledger that looked like it belonged in a different era. Alex worked with breathtaking speed, using a specialized scanner to copy every page of the handwritten ledger while simultaneously cloning the hard drive's contents. Quick question for everyone watching. What do you think they're going to find in those records? Drop your predictions in the comments. Sometimes the truth is worse than we imagine. The meticulous records painted a stomach-churning picture. Marsh wasn't simply embezzling. She was the Brisbane operative for a sophisticated criminal network. Pacific Premium Provisions was indeed a shell company, but the real supplier was Outback Quality Meats, a processing facility that had been shut down by food safety authorities 8 months earlier for extreme bacterial contamination and unsafe practices. Marsh was knowingly purchasing condemned, potentially lethal meat for a fraction of market price and serving it to unsuspecting customers at premium rates. The profits were being funneled through a complex web of shell companies to what appeared to be an organized crime syndicate operating across Queensland. The ledger revealed the full scope. 17 restaurants across Brisbane, Gold Coast, and Cairns were part of the network. Each location had a manager compromised through blackmail or greed, each serving contaminated food to thousands of customers weekly. It wasn't just fraud, it was a public health catastrophe waiting to explode. But the most chilling discovery came from the cloned hard drive. Hidden in an encrypted partition were video files, Marsh's insurance policy. The footage showed Liam in her office, his face pale with terror as she explicitly threatened his sister's medical care. She detailed his fabricated debt, his lack of options, and how she planned to use his accounting background to implicate him in her crimes. "This is worse than corporate fraud," Alex whispered as they reviewed the files on her tablet. "This is systematic poisoning for profit, and she's been holding that kid hostage to keep him quiet." Victoria listened to the audio recording of Marsh's threats, cold fury settling in her bones like ice. The woman had underestimated Liam's conscience, but more importantly, she had made the fatal error of threatening someone under Victoria Sterling's protection. "We have everything we need," Alex said, replacing the ledger and closing the safe. "The evidence is overwhelming. Food safety authorities, federal police, organized crime task force. This brings down the entire network." As they prepared to leave, Victoria's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. "Victoria, emergency." Liam Mitchell admitted to Royal Brisbane Hospital 20 minutes ago. Severe assault. Condition critical. Victoria's blood turned to ice. They got to him. Alex looked up sharply. What? The waiter who passed me the note. He's in the hospital. Critical condition. Victoria's mind raced. Marsh must have figured out he was the leak. We need to go. Now. Alex was already packing her equipment. If they're willing to put him in hospital, they know their network is compromised. This place will be sanitized by morning. They moved through the restaurant's corridors with urgent precision, their cleaning disguises providing perfect cover. But as they neared the service exit, Alex's communicator crackled with an urgent whisper from Victoria. Car in the alley. 2 men watching the entrance. Alex peered through the service door's small window. A black sedan idled in the narrow lane, its occupants clearly surveillance rather than random passers-by. Back exit, Alex said, changing direction. We go through the kitchen loading dock. They slipped out through the kitchen's rear entrance, emerging into a different alley 2 blocks from where they'd entered. Alex's van was compromised now. They needed a new escape route. There's something else, Victoria said as they hurried through Brisbane's back streets. If they hurt Liam this badly, Emma is in immediate danger. His sister, she's the leverage they use to control him. Without him to threaten, she's either a liability or a bargaining chip. Alex pulled out her phone, already dialing. I have contacts in protective services. We can get her into safe custody tonight. No, Victoria said, her voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. We get her ourselves. She's not going into the system where they might reach her. She comes under Sterling Enterprises protection, private security, private medical care, whatever she needs. Victoria, you can't just. I can and I will. Victoria's tone brooked no argument. That young man risked everything to expose a conspiracy that could have killed thousands of people. His sister is not going to suffer because he chose to do the right thing. As they commandeered a taxi to take them to the hospital, Victoria's phone rang. It was Marcus, his voice tight with urgency. The assault wasn't random. Liam Mitchell was beaten by 2 men outside his apartment building. Neighbors reported they were asking about his sister's whereabouts. Emma wasn't home, she's at a friend's place studying. But Victoria, they're hunting for her. Where is she now? Safe, temporarily. My security team intercepted her before she could return home. But this situation is escalating rapidly. We need to move decisively. Victoria stared out at Brisbane's neon-lit streets flashing past. The simple test that had begun with a disguise and a dinner reservation had exploded into something much larger, a criminal conspiracy that threatened thousands of lives, a young man fighting for his life in hospital, and his sister now a target for elimination. Marcus, she said, her voice carrying the steel that had made her one of Australia's most feared business leaders. Cancel my meetings for the next week. Issue a company-wide security alert for all restaurant properties. And get me a direct line to the Australian Federal Police Commissioner. Victoria, what are you planning? War, she replied simply. They hurt someone under my protection. They threatened a young woman whose only crime was having a brother with integrity. They poisoned food that could have killed children, parents, grandparents. Her voice grew colder with each word. They just declared war on the wrong person. The taxi pulled up to the Royal Brisbane Hospital's emergency entrance. Through the glass doors, Victoria could see the controlled chaos of a trauma ward, medical staff moving with urgent precision, family members huddled in waiting areas, the harsh fluorescent lighting that made everything seem stark and unforgiving. Somewhere in that building, a brave young man who had risked everything to do what was right was fighting for his life. And somewhere else in the city, his sister was in hiding, her world shattered because her brother had chosen justice over safety. Victoria Sterling had built her empire by being ruthless when necessary and protective of those who earned her loyalty. Liam Mitchell had earned that loyalty with a folded napkin and 4 words that stopped her heart. Now it was time to show these criminals what happened when they threatened her people. As we head into the final act of this story, I want to ask, what would you do if you discovered a conspiracy that was literally poisoning people for profit? How far would you go to protect someone who showed incredible courage? Share your thoughts below, because what Victoria does next will determine whether justice wins or the criminals escape. The harsh fluorescent lights of Royal Brisbane Hospital's intensive care unit cast everything in stark, unforgiving detail. Victoria Sterling, still in her cleaning uniform, sat beside Liam Mitchell's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Machines beeped rhythmically, monitoring vital signs that told the story of survival against brutal odds. His face was almost unrecognizable, swollen, bruised, with surgical dressings covering the worst of the damage. The attack had been methodical, professional. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, a concussion that had required emergency surgery. The kind of beating designed to send a message. This is what happens to people who talk. But Liam Mitchell was still breathing. Still fighting. A soft knock interrupted her vigil. Alex Chen entered quietly, followed by a young woman who looked heartbreakingly like a feminine version of the man in the hospital bed. Emma Mitchell was 19, with the same hazel eyes and gentle features as her brother, but fear had aged her beyond her years. "Emma," Victoria said softly, standing to meet her. "I'm Victoria. Your brother is going to be all right." Emma's eyes were red with tears, but her voice was steady. "The doctors say he might not wake up for days. Maybe weeks." She looked at the machines, the tubes, the evidence of violence inflicted on the person she loved most in the world. "They did this because of me, didn't they? Because he was trying to protect me." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. This young woman, barely more than a teenager, understood exactly what had happened and was blaming herself for her brother's courage. "No," Victoria said firmly. "They did this because they're criminals, and your brother is a hero. He uncovered something that could have killed thousands of people. He chose to do the right thing, and that choice had nothing to do with you and everything to do with who he is." Emma's composure finally broke, tears streaming down her face. "But if I wasn't sick, if I didn't need all this expensive treatment, he would never have been trapped in that job. He would never have been in that position." Victoria knelt in front of Emma's chair, taking the young woman's hands in her own. "Listen to me very carefully. Your brother didn't see you as a burden. He saw you as someone worth fighting for. Someone worth taking risks for. That's not your fault, that's love." She paused, making sure Emma was listening. "And now it's my turn to fight for both of you." Over the next hour, as Emma sat beside her brother's bed talking quietly to his unconscious form, Victoria made a series of phone calls that would reshape the criminal landscape of Queensland. The first call was to Marcus, setting in motion a coordinated strike across all affected Sterling properties. Every manager identified in Marsh's network would find themselves under investigation by morning, their assets frozen, their criminal enterprises exposed. The second call was to Commissioner Janet Crawford of the Australian Federal Police, a woman Victoria had worked with on corporate fraud cases. The evidence Alex had gathered would trigger the largest food safety investigation in Australian history. The third call was to Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Australia's most advanced epilepsy research centre in Melbourne. By morning, Emma Mitchell would have access to treatments that money typically couldn't buy, because Victoria Sterling was personally funding a research program that would bear her brother's name. But the fourth call was the most important. It was to Stephanie Marsh. Marsh answered on the second ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "Who is this?" "This is Victoria Sterling, owner of the Harbour Crown and 17 other restaurants you've been poisoning for profit." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "I know who you are now," Victoria continued, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of absolute authority. "I know about Pacific Premium Provisions. I know about the contaminated meat. I know about the money laundering and the organized crime connections. I have your ledger, your computer files, and video evidence of you threatening Liam Mitchell." You can't prove. Stephanie, Victoria interrupted, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. In approximately 6 hours, federal agents will be at your door with search warrants. In 12 hours, health inspectors will be closing every restaurant in your network. In 24 hours, your criminal associates will realize you've become a liability. She let that sink in. But here's what's going to happen right now. You're going to disappear. You're going to run as far and as fast as you can, and you're never going to come back to Australia. Because if I ever see you again, if you ever come near Liam or Emma Mitchell again, I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure you spend the rest of your life in prison. You can't just... I can, Victoria said simply. I'm Victoria Sterling. Watch me. She ended the call and turned to find Alex watching her with something approaching admiration. Think she'll run? Alex asked. She's a predator, not a fighter. When the food chain collapses, she'll scramble for survival. Victoria looked back at Liam's still form. By the time he wakes up, this will all be over. Dawn was breaking over Brisbane when the coordinated raids began. Federal police hit 17 restaurants simultaneously, seizing records, computers, and arresting 12 managers. Health inspectors closed every affected location, beginning the largest food recall in Australian history. The media called it Operation Clean Plate, a takedown that revealed a criminal network spanning 3 states and potentially affecting hundreds of thousands of customers. The story dominated headlines for weeks. Organized crime infiltrating the hospitality industry, systematic food contamination, and the brave whistleblower who had risked everything to expose the truth. But Victoria Sterling's name never appeared in any of the reports. As far as the public knew, the investigation began with an anonymous tip to health authorities. 3 days later, Liam Mitchell opened his eyes to find Victoria sitting in the same bedside chair, still keeping vigil. His voice was barely a whisper, his words slurred from medication and healing injuries. Did they get the evidence? Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in days. They got everything, Liam. The whole network is finished. You did it. Emma? Safe. More than safe, she's starting a new treatment program next week. The best doctors in the country, everything she needs, for as long as she needs it. Liam's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand. How? You trusted a stranger with the truth, Victoria said quietly. Now that stranger is trusting you with something equally important. When you're ready, when you've recovered, I want you to come work for me. Not waiting tables, developing ethical oversight programs for Sterling Enterprises. Making sure this never happens again anywhere. She leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of absolute sincerity. You saw something wrong and you risked everything to expose it. That's not just courage, Liam, that's character. And character like yours is exactly what my company needs. If this story of courage, justice, and unexpected redemption moved you, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that standing up for what's right, even when it's dangerous, can change everything. And drop a comment telling me, what would you have done in Liam's position? Would you have had the courage to write that note? 6 months later, the Liam Mitchell Center for Food Safety Ethics opened its doors in Brisbane, funded by Sterling Enterprises and dedicated to preventing corporate fraud in the hospitality industry. Emma Mitchell, her seizures now controlled by cutting-edge treatment, enrolled in university to study medicine, determined to help other families facing medical crises. Stephanie Marsh was arrested attempting to board a flight to Thailand. She's currently serving 15 years in federal prison. The criminal network she worked for was dismantled, with arrests spanning 3 countries. And Victoria Sterling learned that sometimes the most valuable discoveries come not from boardroom strategies or market analysis, but from a folded napkin and the extraordinary courage of ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things. The real treasure wasn't the billions in her bank account, it was the reminder that integrity, courage, and compassion are the currencies that truly matter. Because in the end, we're not measured by what we own, but by how we treat the people who trust us with their secrets, their hope, and their faith in justice. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey. If stories like this inspire you, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. We've got more amazing tales of courage and justice coming your way. Until next time, remember, sometimes the smallest acts of bravery can topple the largest empires of corruption.